Hey, shalom, 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 lakam, which is peace unto you all. Ha'e rab tawab la adam, zah yakam yawam and rachagadol Charlotte, which is good evening. This is your brother Yawan from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nacham adam kaya. Hamalakot hashamayim kwa ra, repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call halayim la la, banawa Yahweh bahasham Yahweh shai. Bahasham rachak, wadash wa mashanal azakwanim nawa. Wamala akim shal rachagadol, which is all praises to our Father Yahweh, which means he exists. Bahasham in the name Yahweh shai delivers. And double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Zayah Shaya, this is Isaiah chapter 55. And we'll get verse 6. And it says, Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call ye upon him while he is near. All right, reading it again. It says, Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call ye upon him while he is near. And ultimately, when is the Lord found and when is he near? All right, let's get that real fast. This is Mashallah, Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 1, that says, Doeth not wisdom cry, and understanding put forth her voice? She standeth in the top of high places, by the way in the places of the paths. She crieth at the gates, at the entry of the city, at the coming in at the doors. All right, and ultimately, this is a picture, all right, of the men of the Lord on the highways and byways, all right, because essentially, the men of the Lord have been dispatched, all right, to ultimately preach his word, being instant in season and out of season, all right, and then also, preaching unto the wind, all right, prophesying to the wind. You see, so that's essentially how the Lord is near, going back to Isaiah, Yeshaya chapter 55 and verse 6. And it says, Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. This word for seek, it says, darash, and it says to resort, to seek with care. It says to frequent a place, all right, because, the word is readily accessible currently, you see, but it's going to come a point in time to where, it's going to be a famine of the word. But it says to practice, to study, all right, to follow, to seek, all right, with application, all right, because that's the purpose of seeking the Lord, because the Lord is ultimately going to deliver the elect of the nation of Yahshua Allah, and ultimately the elect is going to put on as the elect, and they're going to be in the spirit of practicing, studying, following, and seeking with application. All right, let's get another one. This is Zayah Shaya. This is Isaiah chapter 3, and actually, yeah, we'll go back to that. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and we'll start at verse 1. It says, To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. So everything has a specific time that it happens. All right, that's why it says right here, a time for everything. So it says a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. It says a time to kill and a time to heal. The Lord is ultimately healing the nation currently, all right, starting with the elect. And it says a time to break down and a time to build up. It says a time to weep and a time to laugh, which I'm going to go back to verse 3. It says a time to kill and a time to heal. It says a time to break down and a time to build up. The Lord is in the process of breaking down, all right, the strongholds, the deceptions, the lies, essentially, that the so-called white man has essentially built up. And it says a time to build up. The Lord is building up his elect. So it says a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. It says a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away. It says a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And ultimately, we're in the time of right now to where it's the time to speak, you see. But then, all right, after that time to speak, it's going to be a time to keep silence. All right, so during that time, all right, this word isn't going to be readily accessible as it is currently. All right, let's get that real fast. This is Amos Amos chapter 8, and we'll give verse 11, and it says, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord power, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. You see, so specifically it's talking about, the famine of the word, because it's going to come a point in time to where, all right, the men of the Lord are not going to be out on the highways and byways, and to where mercy and compassion isn't going to be allotted, to the masses of Jake. You see, it's going to be some that come in at the last minute, and that's going to it's going to be because the Lord wanted to show mercy and compassion. You see, but for the masses of Jake, hey, Jake not going to be able to hear this word as accessible as it is, currently. You see, because while this word was going out, Jake essentially, misused the word. All right. So continuing on, verse 11 it says, or verse 12 it says, and they shall wander from sea to sea, and from the north even to the east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord, and shall not find it. All right. So ultimately, again, it's going to come a time of the famine of the word. You see, and it's going to be the word is going to be very difficult, very, very difficult to find. You see, and it's only going to be those that essentially the Lord wanted to show mercy that essentially run into the prophets. All right. I'm gonna get this real fast. This is Amos chapter 5, and we'll get verse 13, and it says, therefore the prudent shall keep silence in that time, for it is an evil time. All right. So the prudent being the elect, for the most part, the prophet's not going to be breaking down the scriptures how it is now, to reiterate, because at that time, no one's going to be breaking down the scriptures as it is, currently, when all hell's breaking loose, when it's tanks on the highways and byways, when it's super, super dangerous. All right, the Lord's going to have his men, tucked away. All right, because it's going to be very dangerous. All right, so let's get this. This is Quahalat. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 12. And we'll get verse 1. It says, remember now thy creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. You see, so ultimately, Jake should be in the spirit, all right, of, recalling and recounting and, essentially thinking upon the Lord. You see, in the days of our youth, which it's not written that 2/3 will essentially do this. You see, the elect, the 1/3 is ultimately going to remember the Lord in the days of their youth, in which this word for youth, it goes into, it says, Baharyam, and it says youth. You see, which this root word for this, it says Bachawar, and then also Bahar, and it says to choose. It says to be chosen, to be selected. All right, so the select time, all right, the appointed time, the acceptable time, all right, is ultimately, when, one first hears this truth, because the scriptures tell us, to not put off from day to day. Let's get that real fast. This is Bon Sirach chapter 5, and we'll get verse 7. And it says, make no tarrying to turn to the Lord, and put not off from day to day, for suddenly shall the wrath of the Lord come forth, and in thy security thou shalt be destroyed and perish in the day of vengeance. So ultimately the select time is when we first hear this word, when this word resonates with our spirit. All right, that's the time to turn unto the Lord. All right, because, if not, all right, then, one will be destroyed. All right, and security. All right, which is not a true sense of security. It's a false sense of security, you see. But nevertheless, the elect is going to take advantage of that, because this time period that we in right now is the grace period. The elect is going to take advantage of the grace period. All right, while 2/3 they're going to misuse it. All right, and let's get that. All right, let's get and we'll come back to this. Let's get 2 Chronicles chapter 36, and we'll get verse 15, and it says, and the Lord power of their father sent to them by his messengers, rising up betimes and sending, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. You see, so the Lord has sent out his word, all right, by way of his men, the prophets, all right, because he has compassion on the nation, you see, which the elect ultimately is going to subscribe, all right, to that mercy and compassion with 2/3. They're just going to misuse it, all right. Going to verse 16, it says, but they mocked the messengers of the Most High and despised his words and misused his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, till there was no remedy. And that's ultimately what 2/3 is going to do. They're not going to take advantage of the grace period, and just by default, they're going to be destroyed. All right. So going back to Ecclesiastes chapter 12, and we'll get verse 2, and it says, while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the keepers of the house represent the economists, so currently, All right, they've been trembling, you see, because it's no hope for the economy. All right, eco goes into it's pertaining to the house, or excuse me, the keepers of the house is the economy, and essentially they keep the house, they keep the system of what keeps this place running. All right, and essentially that goes into the economy. The economy is like it's the lifeline of the people. You know how people are spending their money. You see, so going back verse 3, it says, "In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble," all right, the economists, all right, those that essentially are in charge of the economy, and it says, "And the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few." Hey, it's no jobs out here. You see, it says, "And those that look out of the windows be darkened." So before essentially those that's in the correct spirit, they'll be seeking the Lord. Before this happens, you see, because it's happening currently. You see, but this is going to only increase. You see, in which again, those that's in the correct spirit, they're gonna seek the Lord at that choicest time, that select time. You see, because it's gonna be a point in time to where it's gonna be a famine of the word, as we got in Amos, the 8th chapter. All right. So we also get this. This is Second Ezra chapter 5, and let me see. I get verse 1. It says, "Nevertheless has coming the tokens, behold, the days come that they which dwell upon earth shall be taken in great number, and the way of truth shall be hidden, and the land shall be barren of faith." So scriptures say, that faith cometh by hearing. All right, and hearing by the word of the Most High, roughly paraphrasing, so it's showing that, the word isn't going to be readily accessible, you see, because the land is going to be barren of faith. The only ones that's going to have faith is going to be the elect. And it says, "In the way of the truth, in the way of truth shall be hidden." All right. So going into the famine of the word, because again, it's going to come a point in time to where, this word, right now, this word poses a threat, to Esau, Edom's hegemony, you see, but it's going to become a point in time because the devil's going to come down with great wrath. I'm going to get that. I'm going to go ahead and close. But this is our Revelation chapter 12 and verse 12. And it says, "Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time." So with this happening concurrently, or excuse me, with Esau, coming down with that great wrath, all right, with the word going out concurrently, it's gonna pose a threat, to his hegemony, you see. So it's gonna be a famine of the word, and during that, all right, again, this word isn't going to be going out, as it is currently, So if this word resonates with your spirit, it behooves you, to return and to repent, But just wanted to go into that. I don't want to Tazaza by name Paulos, where there was a beautiful edification through the spirit. Well, I don't want to Tazah Atam Yash Layla Tawab. Lord's will, you have a good night. Wa shalom lakam, with just peace and to you all. Shalom, shalom.